right? Because then we can prove it out there. So, we're starting with cash-based systems. We're starting with vulnerable populations like the Veterans Administration. We're starting with, vulnerable populations such as like foster care, folks that come out of foster care, and they're receptive because they're desperate. They're desperate for a solution. Suicide rates are increasing, continuously, up 40% since the year 2000, which is absolutely insane. Um, you know, Mental health illness and diagnoses have doubled since the year 2000. There's a lot of folks looking for an answer to the crisis, yet we're spending 2.5 times more than any other country on healthcare. Like, we're solving the wrong problem. So what we found is actually a lot of momentum in these, in the early adopting communities, but also in the support from our federal lawmakers. They're desperate to cut budgets and they're climbing out of control in the VA and across, our health system. Like, they're looking for innovative solutions. And so we found some really interesting partners that are willing to look at it in a different way. They recognize that we can't keep doing things the same way. And I think that's how we get around the institutions that are naturally going to be very slow moving. It's just by finding those advocates. I always used to say, I spent the first 10 years of my career fighting insurgencies. Now we just try to create them. So, it's about finding those advocates that can really kind of push you into mass market.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it definitely is an interesting time in our history as well. I mean, the one thing that kept running through my head, overall with regards to, healthcare and healthcare costs and all this kind of stuff. Sure. I mean, you could point to, things like drug cost or the cost of equipment or the
So,
infrastructure cost or whatever. I mean, I still come back to, every dollar that doesn't contribute to the actual health, though. Um, I think we should look there first. I mean, that's just sort of my personal selfish, way of looking at it. Like, you think about all the paperwork that you have to fill out for things or all the, bureaucratic things that you have to do in healthcare. I mean, those are the things that really are costing Americans and American lives. But at the same time, that's my personal view. It's not necessarily one that has to be shared, largely, but also I come at it with a lot of perspective, having worked in this environment for a while, and I see all the hard work that's going on, and you have to buy equipment, you have to invest in R&D and all that kind of stuff, and killing those things only is going to hurt us in the end. That's not going to help. So now figure out how do you still feed R&D? How do you still let people get the stuff that they need so that they can do the work that they do? But at the end of the day, um, the work that goes on needs to contribute to the actual positive steps being taken to deliver healthcare.
yeah, no, I mean, I think that's incredibly fair. And I mean, the it definitely will force small businesses like us to be much more lean and cognizant of translational medicine, right? And translational, discovery. So if it's, it definitely puts a lot of constraints on basic research, right? That doesn't have application. But I'm hoping, I'm hoping if there's any good to come out of these new constraints is that small businesses like us, we have new impetus where we're not going to be distracted by chasing new shiny things. We know we have to get to product or we don't survive.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about you and some of your experiences. So what's the greatest leadership advice that you ever received?
Um, you know, I remember it like it was yesterday. When after my first tour in Iraq, we were back at Fort Campbell, Kentucky, and General David Petraeus was changing command, and the whole division was on the field, in formation, and I don't generally pay attention to those speeches. There's a lot of whatever. It's just not something that motivates me. But there was something he said that I just never been able to forget. And he just somewhere in a speech he said, "Perspective by definition requires distance." And, I think whenever, especially, as from a leader, whether it's operational or strategic, and sometimes when you're trying to push hard, and especially like in a startup environment, you're driving so hard and you get so myopic, you truly have to you force yourself into a place of distance to regain perspective. And that's been something that's just served me really well with, with teams too, and team dynamics and how people interact with each other.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely, I mean, what I find with some of General Petraeus's quotes is that you really have to sort of think about it in a basic sort of sense as well. I mean, it's more profound than that, but it's it's also like, look, if you were standing nose against a wall, it's really hard to tell like what color is this, what are the decorations on the wall, whatever.
Right.
You have no perspective. You
That's
stand
right.
20 feet away, all of a sudden you may get a little bit more perspective. Stand 100 feet away, it's going to change again. I mean, it is a very profound sort of statement in a lot of ways, but also then to apply it, in other aspects and say, well, look, if you're way too close to something, you just might not be able to see it for what it is. And so you might want to
Mm.
take a step back.
Yeah, I've seen it, been able to apply it kind of both philosophically and physically. Sometimes you do need to get out of your office or out of your lab or, out of your neighborhood or out of your town, to just think about it from another perspective, right? Philosophically, just like, I need to look at this in a different way. So yes, I agree. It's very practical.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell me a little bit more about what inspires you.
You know, uh, trauma is not a uplifting topic, and everything we deal with is serious, right? I mean, the human tragedy is it's really hard to sit in. And I think we're never going to eliminate trauma or chronic stress in our society. In fact, we need people to go into harm's way and do do and experience really horrible things, for the defense of our nation, or like, just these rescue workers in the flood in Texas, who are having to recover the bodies of children. We need them to bring those children home, right? We need to have people exposed to the brutalities of the human experience. um, but we have an opportunity now where it doesn't have to create chronic disease. We don't have to ruin their lives over it. We can intervene in a helpful way that's focused on human performance and longevity, and it takes away the stigma and it takes away the attribution. It gives folks an opportunity. We say, we had a special operator commander say, hey, we want to do this because we want to get them better so we can put them back in harm's way. And I think that that's inspiring. We're not going to change, the human experience and the tragedy that comes along with it. But man, wouldn't that be just awesome if we can use a test like this to objectively heal people in a different way where it doesn't result in lifelong suffering. And that's honestly what makes me wake up every day.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things, right? I mean, it's interesting as a human that you can hide so much from people, right? I mean, you can't. I mean, granted, you can see scars and you could see, missing limbs and all those sort of things. It's really hard to see somebody that's struggling with, PTSD, or it's really hard to see, somebody that, has some other trauma, but yet we may see signs and sort of brush it off and try and move forward that, like you said earlier, very, a very astute comment about are wanting to separate the physical from the mental, and in reality, they become one and the same. So, yeah.
Yeah.
What concerns you?
Yeah. You know, the data, right? The data doesn't lie. Every chronic disease is increasing in prevalence in America. Cancer is set to go from a $200 billion burden to 300 billion by 2030. Um, Suicides have increased 40% since 2000, right? Like I mentioned before, and all the things are going the wrong way. And we spend a lot on we spend so much money in this country to reverse it, and none of the trends are reversing. We know more about the human body we ever had before, but the human body is not fundamentally changed. We are better at diagnosing, better at treating, but everything is going in the wrong direction. And from a Occam's razor perspective is, oftentimes the simple solution may be the most viable.